PhD between math, chemistry, and physics. I knew something was going to be up, but wanted to bring them in and find out what. Despite them having a meticulous resume, they couldn't speak a word of English. Very awkward time. I didn't hire him, but there's a man working at my old high school with a master's in aerospace engineering and a couple other degrees. He worked for NASA and was one of the men who helped design the craft that put men on the moon. He's the guy who checks to see if you have been signed out before you leave campus. He's got an amazing sense of humor and he has this air about him that just makes him fun to talk to. I spoke to him about his history a couple times. It's just weird to think that the guy keeping kids from sneaking off campus is a little rocket scientist. My PhD dad lost his job when I was in middle school. He applied for a job at Wendy's and was told he was overqualified. It was a tough time for him and our family, but things eventually turned around for us. I'm proud of him for being willing to do whatever it took to take care of us. You shouldn't put your advanced degree down if you're serious about the job. I applied for fast food, left off my BS and Mass, lied and told them I had no degree. I got the job. I had 18 years experience working in a scratch bakery as a baker and full-time cake decorator. Also years of high-end restaurant experience as a side job. Quit the side job and few years later wanted a part-time job to save money to move to Hawaii. Taco Bell sent me an email saying I wasn't qualified among many other places. Pizza Hut is the only place that I could get to hire me as a driver. It was for the best. I loved working with those guys. Now I live in Hawaii. Not an employer, but when I was a freshman in college, I worked in the dining hall with a line cook who had been a corporate financial manager at a large local corporation. His company had gone under and laid off almost everyone, and he was having a hard time finding a position. He was friends with the head of dining services and ended up working as a line cook. I'm pretty sure he got promoted very quickly to management, causing some bitter feelings among the other cooks. My understanding was that the company knew they'd have a management position open several months after he applied, so they asked him to work as a cook until the position opened. As a student worker, he was the nicest man I worked with, and an incredibly hard worker. I was glad when I came back the next academic year and found him as a manager, and I hope he's doing well now. I own a catering business restaurant bar. I had a lady applying for a waitress job last year. She worked for IRS, government. She was a top accountant, but made some small money laundering at her last workplace, so nobody wanted to hire her. I hired her anyway. Top employee for less money. Everybody deserves a second chance. I employed her as a financial consultant and stock manager, not as a waitress. She doesn't have access to any official documents or bills. His job is to discuss with us and give the board financial advice because she has a great experience in the field and I want to use that. Also, every day she makes the statistics and future food stock predictions for the upcoming week, estimated usage of food and drinks, stuff like that. I was manager of a small cafe and people used to drop in resumes all the time. One day a woman who was in her early 60s came in with a resume. Usually I would thank people and put it aside until after service, but on that day I happened to take a quick glance. Her last position said she had been a consultant specialist in emergency medicine. I then saw Doctors Without Borders and a further 30-ish years of a medical career. I sat down with her and asked her why she wanted the job. She said she'd recently retired and was bored out of her skull. She was looking for a job that had the same energy requirements but without the responsibility or shift length. She then said she'd work for free, but I said if I gave her a job I'd have to pay her. She asked for $5 an hour, to which I said I'd have to pay her minimum wage. I put her on a trial and she smashed it, so I offered her 3 days a week. She was easily the most organized and stress-free staff member I've ever employed. She worked for us for a bit under a year before deciding to go back into aid work. She also donated all her earnings from that job. Still one of my favorite people in the world. I was a supervisor at a restaurant and the hostess had her master's in hospitality tourism management. She never worked before because she was always in school and had to start off somewhere. I was a host with a master's for 6 months last year. I had several years of work experience, but finding a full-time job was a bee. I still don't have a job related to my degrees, but I had an interview last week. I should hear something before the end of the week. I used to hang out at a small garage that worked on mostly dirt bikes, four-wheelers, and sleds. A guy came in one day in a business suit asking about a job. He seemed friendly, talked for a bit. His only request was to have a separate work area, and to kinda be left alone. The next day the owner of the shop came out of his office with the guy's resume in hand and asked if it was a joke. Everyone told him it wasn't to their knowledge. Anyway, the guy went to MIT, had a ton of helicopter mechanic experience and was last working for some aeronautics company. The owner of the shop called him and had him come in to talk. The guy's little brother had some terminal disease and wanted to be around more. He worked there for a couple years till his brother died and he left. I left town right as the guy was hired, but my friends at the shop said he was freaking magic with engines, but never really warmed up to anybody. A customer had brought his sled into the shop constantly for blown engines. New sled, third engine, and nobody knew what was causing it. The customer was peeved because he was only getting 1 or 2 rides per season and the rest of the time it was in the shop. The overqualified guy comes out of his corner and looks down in the fuel tank and tells them to replace the fuel pickup hose. The fuel pickup line was cracked and sucked air when the fuel got under half tank, caused the engine to not get oil to lubricate. 2-stroke. Holy crap. Engine raid man sounds like someone I'd want on my team. Years ago while in college I had an engineer apply at Wendy's. Floored me. Then she explained that her and husband had just been transferred and she needed something until she got hired elsewhere, which made sense. I don't really understand people